When do education benefits expire? Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and recently I posted a video about the Supreme Court's so-called Rudisill decision. This ruling says that if a service member earned both the Montgomery GI Bill and the post-9/11 GI Bill with two separate qualifying service periods, that they can combine those benefits to get up to 48 months of total educational benefit. Essentially, before this decision, the VA was capping educational benefits at 36 months, and they were essentially requiring veterans to pick between one of those two programs. Under the VA's old way of doing things, the question of expiration dates was less of a pressing issue. Lots of veterans were opting for the post-9/11 GI Bill, and as a result, many of them had benefits that simply never expired. But now, with Rudisill, the Montgomery GI Bill is back on the table, along with its quirky rules about expiration dates and extensions. To get started, let's just knock out the basics about these time limits. First, this video is only going to talk about two programs: Montgomery GI Bill for active duty and the post-9/11 GI Bill. I'm going to give you the standard timelines, how to request extensions, and under what conditions you might qualify for those extensions, and then some special considerations due to Rudisill. But before we go on, I want to say this. I am specifically not including the Montgomery GI Bill for the selected reserve in this video. Despite the similarities in naming and some of the rules, Montgomery GI Bill for active duty and for the selected reserve are fundamentally constructed differently within the law. There are some crazy rules about the selected reserve version of the Montgomery GI Bill, and those go way beyond the scope of this video. Okay, first things first, let's do a tiny bit of vocabulary. The last day you are eligible to utilize your education benefits is called the delimiting date. And, in fact, each of your educational benefits can have a different delimiting date, but don't let the funny word sidetrack you. For the active duty version of the Montgomery GI Bill, the delimiting date is 10 years after the last release from active duty. Now, if you had a break in service where you went off active duty and then came back for a period of 90 days or more, your delimiting date resets to 10 years after your second release from active duty. Now, there's no guarantee that that reset is going to be automatic. You might have to contact the VA, request an extension, and then prove that you served the additional time. For the post-9/11 GI Bill, there was a change in delimiting dates centered around 2013. If you separated from active duty prior to January 1st, 2013, the post-9/11 GI Bill delimiting date was 15 years after separation. But with the so-called Forever 9/11 GI Bill, anyone who separated after the beginning of 2013 no longer has an expiration date for their post-9/11 GI Bill benefits. All right, so that is the basics. And now, when do you qualify for an extension and how do you request one? Well, not surprisingly, the VA has a website for GI Bill extensions, but it's not so great for two reasons. Number one, there is no online method for applying for an extension. Instead, the website directs you to mail your documents to a regional processing office. And there's not even a form. They literally say, send us a letter to request an extension. And number two, the VA website lists a couple of reasons you might qualify for an extension. Serving that later period of active duty we mentioned before, having an illness or disability that prevents you from attending school, or being held by a foreign government after your last discharge from active duty. But in Section 3031 of Title 38 U.S. Code, there are actually more reasons that a person might be eligible for an extension. These include if your benefits would expire during a semester or a quarter, if you were acting as the primary provider of personal care services for another veteran, or if there was a temporary or permanent closure of an educational institution because of an emergency situation. All of this makes me think that if you're trying to get an extension on these benefits, that it's a good idea to track down a Veterans Service Officer, a VSO, and get their advice and assistance. Oh, and send that letter, certified mail with signature confirmation. Anyways, into this whole stew plops Rudisill. Before the Supreme Court ruling, lots of people were focusing on the post-9/11 GI Bill benefits. They kind of forgot about the Montgomery GI Bill. But suddenly, ooh, I can get 12 more months of benefits? What's my delimiting date? Well, it turns out that if your Rudisill review is approved, then your delimiting date is recalculated based off of when you applied for the review, which is good, but then the VA goes on to make an unusual recommendation. Basically, they recommend gaming the system a bit. The VA says that if you're not ready to use your benefits, then maybe you don't apply for your review quite yet. The idea seems to be that that'll give you an even bigger window to use your benefits in. Personally, I don't think that's such a great idea. Because if it was me, the first thing I'd want to do is confirm that I'm entitled to the benefits before I commit myself to needing them. Second, there is a deadline for this whole Montgomery GI Bill program coming up on October 1st of 2030. After that, the VA says that they are going to be using normal delimiting date calculation rules. That makes me think that they're just going to close up shop, and people who tried to get a little too clever gaming the system are just going to be SOL. Oh, and I am not 100% sure that these Rudisill reviews are going to be decided quickly. So you do what you think is smart for you, but if it was me, I'd rather have a benefit letter in hand than some letter under review. And now, if you want to see how to get a refund of the money that you paid into the Montgomery GI Bill if you didn't use all your benefits, watch this video to see the really quirky trick that you have to orchestrate to get that done.